I'm in a different place today. I'm in the car and it's incredibly hot, so I'm probably gonna keep it a bit shorter today. I was thinking about gardening, actually vegetable gardening. As you guys may know, it is something I enjoy doing, and especially since I've been slowly getting better from with my MECFS, I have also been able to do it a bit more intensely, especially this season. But generally, I have a few years of experience with it, and the other day I was just thinking about how gardening can teach you quite a few life lessons. To be fair, I think this can be said about quite a few hobbies, or pretty much any hobby, which is why it's really nice to have these, not just because they're enjoyable, but also because they tend to teach you a lot. And in terms of gardening, the first thing that I think a lot of people will also immediately think of is patience. Gardening really teaches you to be patient because plants or vegetables or whatever, they don't grow that quickly. They take time, and you cannot expect to get results immediately. Like in terms of vegetable gardening, a lot of it is seasonal. One season, that kind of. So it's like repetitive for each year. And it tends to be quicker, actually, I would say, than maybe many other forms of gardening, where it's more like let's say you're more into fruits or orchards and stuff like that, or just ornamental gardening. A lot of that is way more long term, I would say. And vegetable gardening, of course, there's also perennials and stuff like that. But I think a lot of the main stuff that people tend to grow in the vegetable growing community are annuals. So it's like you basically have to cram it into like however long your season is, but nonetheless you have to be patient. For some things like chilies, peppers, you have to start pretty early, and then you can only expect results maybe half a year later. So you still need some patience. I think that's something that gardening for sure teaches you. It has taught me that. I'm getting better at that in general. It also teaches you consistency. I think you definitely need to be consistent to some degree to have some success with gardening, I would say. Of course, you also don't have to be micromanaging everything, and you don't have to show up daily, really. I think for most forms of gardening, it's enough to do like something on a weekly basis, but it really depends. It depends how the weather is. Like in terms of vegetable gardening, when it's really hot, and you don't have an automatic watering system, whatever, then let me take this off. Then yeah, you might have to water once a day or even twice a day at times when it gets really dry. That's what we've been having here in my area in Germany recently, so that has been pretty exhausting just to water the plants. So yeah, you generally have to show up regularly. You need consistency to see the results. Another thing that I think gardening for sure teaches you is just generally getting closer to nature, understanding life cycles better, understanding the cycle of nature, and just generally how things are all related to each other, how things in nature tend to work. Of course, some people know a lot about this anyways without gardening, but I would say a lot of people who maybe grew up in not so rural areas and grew up kind of slightly detached from nature. I think gardening is a great way to get closer back to nature and just to get a better understanding and feeling for it all. Just some examples are like composting. Just the process of composting, I think, is just really interesting. Just seeing whatever you throw on it, just organic material, really, may it be food scraps, but it could also be leaves or other stuff. Theoretically, it could also be, meat and other things, but I don't do that. But yeah, and then seeing that turn into compost and then being able to use that to grow next season's food. That's pretty cool. Another thing that I can think of is just accepting failures, like accepting loss. Because when you do gardening, it is almost a given that some things are going to die. Some things are not going to thrive. Some things are not going to produce for you. I think there's no vegetable gardener out there who doesn't have that, or doesn't have that even every season. Like, you should probably have like at least one thing that doesn't grow properly for you each season, I would say. Unless you're maybe like some really professional dude, or You're just growing the same stuff every year. But even when you do that, I think the chances are really high that you're gonna have some failures each season. It's not just because of you, but also because of the nature of it. Because you're dependent on nature, you're dependent on the climate, and that naturally just leads to, you know, some seasons where a lot of things might go wrong, and then some seasons a few less things go wrong. But overall, generally, I would say there's got to be a few failures, and gardening, you know, you just got to accept it, you just got to live with it. And I think when you get to know people in the community, it's also pretty normal, I would say. You know, it's just, you always hear people who even have like 20, 30 years of experience. They're going to be like, yeah, this year's, I know this year's squash plants just aren't doing it. Like, no idea what. Or maybe the potatoes this year have some pests. Like, no idea where they came from, but they're there and you cannot change it. And sometimes, of course, you can try to fight things, and but you have to choose your battles. And generally, it is part of it to just accept some losses, to accept some failures. Of course, you can still learn something from it, but really, once you have to deal with nature, you start to accept that there are certain things you cannot just always deal with. There's certain things you cannot just, you know, solve. And kind of similar to that is letting go of control. I think I am generally, I think, guilty of being a too controlling personality type. You know, I really dislike, I guess, being in environments where I feel really out of control. And it's something I'm trying to improve on. And gardening, kind of in the same vein of what I was saying with accepting failures, it's also about letting go of control. Because, yeah, when you deal with nature, you understand that it's out of your control how the weather's gonna be, whether certain pests come or not. Of course, in terms of pests, you can sometimes do certain things to avoid them or to minimize the risk, but still there's, you know, just always random stuff that's gonna happen. And I think, yeah, the letting go of control generally is also just a natural development that a lot of gardeners go through. I think when you start out, at least with my type of personality, you end up, you know, researching a lot, and you just try to optimize everything, and you really read up everything you can about this, and then you just follow what people are saying, to the details, and in the end, the more experience you get, the more you understand how generally how there are no fixed rules in gardening. Like, of course, there are certain tendencies and certain things that make sense, but you'll quickly get to realize how it's gonna be very different growing this crop in, let's say, your climate compared to a climate in a very different country. And even in the same country, or even in the same city, you're gonna have different microclimates and all that. And you know, it's just like there's so many variables and so many things out of your control. You're just gonna quickly realize someone's rules or advice might not apply to you. And generally, you also just go through this, I guess, this maturing process of sometimes, you know, you just let things go because it's just too exhausting to try to control everything, especially when you're growing more than just like 2-3 plants. If you're growing, like, let's say, I'm probably this season growing at least 10 different vegetables, I would say, and then add to that a few types of fruit. And you know, there are certain things I just let go. Of course, especially with MECFS or being physically limited, I just have to do it. Like, you know, I cannot control everything. Like, for some things, I'm happy when I just manage to get some seeds to germinate, and then I plant them out, and sometimes I just let them be. Sometimes I don't even, you know, even though it is recommended and it makes sense to trellis them, to add some trellis and let them go up, like, sometimes I just don't have the energy, right? And then I just let it grow on the ground, you know, I let it sprawl. It's probably not as efficient, it's not the best way, and it's more maybe likely to get some disease, but yeah, you just accept it, and then your life is just nicer anyways if you're not too bothered by it. So I think gardening can teach you to let go of your need for control, and generally I think that's something that can be really nice for certain types of people. Yeah, who have this kind of issue. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to talk about. Maybe just some generally nice things about gardening. It feels like I'm trying to sell you this hobby, but to be honest, there's so many cool hobbies out there, and just try them out and see what sticks and what's fun to you. And of course, gardening is also something you cannot just do if you don't have the space for it. But of course, if you want to just do something more with plants, I would say that's for sure possible for almost anyone. You know, you can get into house plants. You can, if you have a balcony, there's also balcony gardening, or even indoors, just, you know, growing some herbs. That's also fine as long as you get light. Of course, if you live in a place where there's zero light and you don't want to have artificial light, then that's gonna be tough. So some generally nice things is, besides it being fun and being a good challenge and you being able to learn a lot of interesting things, I think one really great aspect of gardening is that it makes you go outside and gets you moving, and you can kind of adjust it to your physical level, I would say. Of course, if you're completely unable, like when I was at my worst, of course I couldn't garden because I had to lie in bed almost the entire day. And then, yeah, no matter how easy you want to make gardening, you still have to be able to do some stuff. But I would say generally, if you're a healthy person, it can be nice just to get outside, to get moving. I think can be really good for your mental health as well. And another really nice part of vegetable gardening, at least, is that it gets you to try different varieties of vegetables and fruit and whatever, you know, of produce. Because in a grocery store, you're usually limited to very few varieties of, let's say, tomatoes. Like there's probably, like, usually in a German supermarket, I would say 3, 4, maybe 5 types of tomatoes. But if you're like on a seed website for tomatoes, you're gonna see like hundreds of types sometimes. And you know, and then you might also just make some friends in the community, and then you end up just getting interesting varieties that they tried last season and recommend to you. So that's pretty cool. And in the same vein, you also tend to become a better home cook, I would say. Because, you know, sometimes I grow stuff simply because the plant looks interesting and because I want to try it out. And sometimes the fruit looks interesting or the vegetable looks interesting, but I've never had it actually before. And then I get the seeds, I grow it, and then I end up with the vegetable. And then I need to figure out what to make of it. And then you basically are forced to learn about using new vegetables that you haven't cooked with before, that you haven't prepared before. And yeah, I think that's great. For me, cooking, making food is just another interest of mine. It's very important to me, and vegetable gardening is just like a perfect complement to it, I would say. And even if you're not so into cooking, I would say you can still, but if you still enjoy eating it, if you have someone like a partner or friends who are good at cooking, you can just, you know, bring a lot of fresh vegetables to their place, and then, you know, they cook for you. Maybe that's a good deal. I would say it's a good deal for both people. But anyways, yeah, you get to try different varieties, and you just generally widen your horizon, not only in terms of gardening, but also in terms of the culinary world. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. You're also probably getting healthier, not just because of the physical aspect of it and getting outside, but also you probably are eating more vegetables, I would say, if you're growing a lot of vegetables. But yeah, that's just a nice side effect. Get your fiber if you can. That's a general recommendation. I think you can't go wrong with that. Anyways, yeah, that's it. I am sweating my ass off. It is incredibly hot. I want to open the windows, but I was a bit anxious about other people walking past and then hearing me talk. I mean, I don't know why. It's not like it's unusual for someone to talk in the car. But yeah, I'm excited about the World Cup final. Actually, not super excited, to be honest, because of course I was first rooting for Germany, but then Germany exited. And then I went through this journey of rooting, I guess, for a team, but then this team kept getting kicked out of the tournament. And yeah, you know, with the semifinals, I was kind of supporting France the most out of the 4. The order was kind of like France, and then England, and then Spain, and then Argentina. But basically, yeah, my first two got knocked out, France and England, and then I'm left with Spain and Argentina. And you know, I don't really dislike Spain that much. I think it's more the history of them knocking us, like Germany, out in recent history. And maybe also the Cucurella handball thing in the last Euros. But honestly, besides that, I don't dislike them that much. But I feel like Argentina, there's somehow, I really love Messi. You know, I love Messi. But somehow, I don't know why, I just don't like that team as much. And I feel like a lot of people online share this sentiment. But yeah, I'm gonna be rooting for Spain, I guess. But to be honest, I don't have too many stakes in this final. I feel like both the teams I was kind of rooting for in the best of four, basically in the semifinals, are out. So yeah, it hasn't been the best World Cup in terms of personal team supporting. It has been entertaining though. I have to give that to whatever. Actually, I don't want to give it to FIFA or Infantino, but it has been entertaining. I have to say that. Anyways, talk to you guys next.